Good evening, everyone. This is John Daw. We are back here for week 14 of our COVID-19 COVIDcast Town Hall with Dr. Sanjay Udoshi. My name is John Daw, and I am your producer tonight. I am also at my actual job working, so I will be in and out throughout the evening, but we have Karen and Terry here as well, who are going to be helping us out as usual tonight. As we jump into this week, I will start it off by saying we are in the webinar format, so you have a Q&A feature on your toolbar if you're participating by Zoom. And you can jump in there, ask any questions and answers. You can also put them in the chat, but no promises that we will see it there because we are actively monitoring the Q&A section of the webinar interface. And if you are watching us via live stream on Facebook, Terry usually checks in on the Facebook question feed, so he may see some stuff there. So if you are asking questions there, just be patient with us. That has about a 1-minute delay. So we may move on to something, jump back and forth, and go ahead. So I will open tonight by saying last week I talked about going through the Rite Aid pharmacy drive-through and doing the COVID test that took literally 72 seconds because I timed it so I could tell you all how easy that was. Got my results, no COVID, fine, and everything. But that is me, and despite what some elected officials may suggest, testing is key to us beating this thing. And with that, we'll turn it over to Dr. Udoshi. Sanjay, good evening.
Good evening, John. Glad to hear you are COVID-free and continue to be healthy and happy. And thanks for arranging to join us and produce this, even though you are at work. I have Karen and Terry with me, and I'm glad to see that they're happy and healthy and looking good. So this week, and as you may know, today specifically, Dr. Anthony Fauci did testify in front of the House Committee, so I'll start this and we'll go from here. Here's my slideshow. Okay, so here's some interesting stuff. All right, this week I hope to cover a little bit about what was presented today by Dr. Anthony Fauci, some of the basic statistics, but here are the takeaways from what we learned. Obviously by the statistics and by all measures from epidemiology experts, this first wave, both globally and specifically in the United States, is not over. And there is actually a resurgence underway globally and specifically again in the United States. That resurgence is being led by states like Arizona, Texas, Oklahoma, Florida, California, and Arkansas, where their control measures are clearly not working as well as some of the other states. And I'll show you some of the data on that. Apparently in the Northeast, where we had the original hotspot, in New York State, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Connecticut, there has been a significant level of control exerted, significant decline in the number of newly confirmed cases on a 7-day rolling average, as well as significant reduction in mortality. And all of this is very, very good news. I think that within the next 15 days, there are going to be a lot of new data assembled in the form of scientific papers and other releases from academic centers and others who are studying in real time and through observational studies the effect of control measures, as well as the effect of certain protocols for treatment, both in the early and late phases of the COVID disease, that will allow us to understand why we've been actually able to reduce mortality. Last week, I showed you a curve about the initial 4 to 6, I think it was 5 weeks. It was a 5-week average where the mortality on a week-to-week basis the slope was very aggressive, and the slope of that curve has definitively changed over the past 5 weeks. And clearly, the medical community as a whole has become more effective in dealing with patients, especially those patients who are coming for hospitalization. So that's great news. And obviously, over the past weeks, if you've been joining us, you know that we've covered some of the novel discoveries and novel protocols that include experimental antivirals, but also highly effective old standbys in critical care medicine, such as steroids, specifically most recently from the UK, a study on dexamethasone, which is a corticosteroid that has been widely used for decades. It's an analog to prednisone, which you may have heard of as a drug that is disease modifying in autoimmune disorders and used in many other disorders to suppress immune response, which we know is a primary detriment of COVID infection, is what we've early on called the cytokine storm, where the body is elicited by the virus to produce a huge immune response, and the immune response is actually more damaging than the virus itself. So dexamethasone, corticosteroids, as standbys for decades, known safety, known risk profile, and known efficacy are being employed to reduce mortality. And so are other standbys, like as we covered before, the trimodal therapy consists of novel antivirals, anti-inflammatory, otherwise known as immune modulators, and then of course anticoagulants. And so I can continue to read that there are a lot of deaths that are caused by stroke, clotting, pulmonary embolism, myocardial infarction, acute kidney injury that cause the patient to deteriorate very rapidly. So employing low molecular weight heparin and other anticoagulants in that category is shown to reduce the incidence of dangerous clotting events and dangerous micro angiopathy related to those micro coagulopathy that is a hallmark of COVID disease. So, medical mumbo jumbo aside, what it really shows is in the past 4 months, and now we're, this is week 14 of John and I doing this, but in the past 4 months, the medical community here in the United States and internationally has learned to much more effectively combat COVID. And so that we're seeing case fatality rates, being cut by a third or as great as a half in the last 5 weeks. So the slope of the curve being, like this initially is now is starting to decline. So it's not just the flattening of the infection curve, but also the effectiveness of treating those patients with the most severe illness that require hospitalization that is reducing the mortality of this disease. Okay, so we'll go through some charts and graphs, Sanjay's favorite stuff, but in essence, Dr. Fauci's testimony talked about all of these elements, improvements, et cetera, in our approach to treatment, in our approach to containment, and others. The underlying sentiment of his testimony, without being entirely pessimistic, is that America really cannot make a comeback without control. So I can go back to this slide, but let me just proceed through a couple of slides here. So this is, as you can see, between March 23rd and May 25th, the world saw somewhat of a flattening of the growth of the disease. If you can see my mouse on the screen, you can see there's kind of a flattening here. Once this took grip in other emerging countries, as well as especially in Latin America, the virus found a new opportunity, and now the global case count is rising as well fast, as well as the global daily confirmed cases. So we've gone from an average of around 70,000 new cases a day to somewhere around 150,000 new cases a day. That's almost a doubling, and that's extremely concerning because mortality in these countries is going to be much higher. It's not because of the natural course of disease having a specific mortality number, but it's also because of the infrastructure in countries like Russia and Brazil and others that are seeing a huge fast rise in COVID cases, and that are going to be overwhelmed, compounded by the fact that their reporting infrastructure is number one, unreliable, and number two, politically influenced. So with leadership like you see in Russia and in Brazil, the numbers are not reliable and most likely belie a much, much worse scenario on the ground. So we have that. Here's the specific data from yesterday on the prevalence of the disease. So we've had, almost 2.3 million confirmed cases in the United States. About 1.6 million people have recovered successfully, and then we have others who are continuing to recover, and then those who are currently ill with the disease make up the remainder. So great news for those 1.6 million that had it and recovered. Most likely, like we said, about 60% of them will carry antibodies, and 40% of them will not. But those 60 that carry antibodies will have some degree of long-term protection. The estimate is somewhere between 2 to 3 years of protection, but that could be less. It could be as little as 18 months of protection. That is based on how fast the virus will continue to replicate. And as it replicates and finds new opportunities, it will mutate. And if significant strains emerge that are very different from those that infected the United States in the last 4 months, then those who were infected and have antibodies will not see immunity from these new strains. We've covered this many times in the last few weeks about the East Coast strain in the United States being largely from European based influx and infection, and the West Coast being from Asia Pacific based infection. So two different strains even here in the United States. Those are not mutually protective. Once you've recovered from one strain, it doesn't protect you from another. At least that's what we understand right now. So we're seeing in the United States over 300 deaths a day, as compared to some other countries that are well past their peak, such as Spain and Italy, and Germany. As you can see here, Spain saw only 1 death yesterday, 23 in Italy and 7 in Germany. These numbers are obviously important to monitor because it is the ultimate cost of this pandemic. The death of productive citizens, the death of the elderly, whoever, it is the ultimate cost. And the real troubling number, obviously, is 30,000 new cases were detected yesterday. So we're not even close to out of the woods. And this is the company we're keeping. Mexico, Brazil, India, Peru, Iran, Russia, Pakistan, Egypt, Colombia, and Sweden. Sweden, who experimented with the natural development of herd immunity, it now can count itself among these other nations and their outstanding healthcare systems. Mexico saw over 1,000 deaths yesterday. Brazil, close to 1,000, but I would triple that number because it's Brazil. The United States, over 350. India is increasingly seeing a lack of control in hotspots. Peru, Iran, Russia, that number is completely unreliable. Pakistan, almost as reliable as Russia. Egypt, Colombia, and whether that number is accurate or not in Sweden, for a nation that has 60,000 cases to have lost 70 people in a day, and new cases growing by over 700 a day is, they speak for themselves. So here's what we should look like. Can anyone guess, Terry? Where do I see the rest of you guys? How do I see? Yeah.
I think because we're in webinar, you can only see Terry and I for now.
Okay, so Terry and Karen, you get first guess. What country is this?
This would be New Zealand.
No.
Oh.
New Zealand never saw more than 1,500 cases total.
Oh wait, where do you have your cursor on?
No, just this whole graph. What country does?
Oh, what country is that?
Yeah.
Ooh.
South Korea.
Close, but close in statistics, but no.
Okay. Someone said Italy.
Correct.
Let's get the name right so I don't steal her thunder. Karen Colber.
Okay, excellent. Karen gets a free T-shirt from Montudoshi Industries. So, we heard, like 5-6 weeks ago, that Italy's healthcare system was overwhelmed, especially in the region of Lombardy, also in Foggia in the south. We heard that there were military trucks taking bodies out of certain towns because the morgues were overwhelmed, and these were all true. They were hit massively. 6,500 cases at their peak, in a single confirmed in a new day, and that was back in March before they had thorough testing. So the number of these numbers are probably incorrect, but they represent the containment of COVID in their country. So they were successful in standing back up after they got hit extremely hard, right? And their economy was devastated and down for about 3 months. And now they have reopened, and their level of control is less than 300 new cases a day confirmed. And obviously you saw what they lost 23 citizens yesterday. Okay, we lost 300. And we have 30,000 new cases. So with a mortality rate of 1.5%, we're going to lose 450 people of those who tested positive yesterday. This is the 7-day average of new coronavirus cases from March 1 to June 21st, which is only 2 days ago. The European Union as a whole, all 43 nations, I think, have 3,400 cases confirmed in the last 7 days. And the United States has, this is the average, obviously, on a daily basis. So on a daily basis, we have 28,300 new cases per day. So this is a picture of control of the pandemic versus us, which is awful. Okay. Next, the European Union has decided that it may be necessary to close their borders to American travelers if we don't get our numbers under control. So we may not be able to travel to the European Union until the United States has exerted the same level of control as they have. The extremely high prevalence of COVID in the United States leads to extremely high risk for any of us. We present a very high risk to any other country now. So we're the new Congo, and COVID is the new Ebola.
Sanjay, I have a question for you about herd immunity.
I know. I've got that. Is that from Gerda?
It is from Gerda in Arizona.
Yes, I'm covering that in the next couple of slides.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Hey, Sanjay?
Yeah.
Yeah, could you go back to the slide where it showed the European Union?
Sure.
I just want to say with great Texas pride, you see that average at 3.4 thousand? Yeah, Texas this past weekend hit a record at 4,000 new cases in one day.
So more than all of the European Union combined.
Today, a week later, not even a week later, 4 days later, we topped 5,000 from yesterday to today.
And it's sunny in Texas, just to clarify, right? There was
The Rona has this great sunscreen, and it slathers it on, and it just really
walks around with it,
struts
enjoying that Texas sunshine, soaking up those rays.
There was a few people that floated the idea that the virus could not survive in warm weather and sun, just for anyone who might not understand our sarcastic sense of humor.
But I mean, we knew that when Singapore was hit. I don't know if any of you have been to Singapore. Singapore is like 93 degrees with 80% humidity year round. Okay. And the only reason it wasn't the weather. It was, they controlled it with science. Australia, has a high rate of transmission as well. And they are, they're in their winter right now. What is it going to look like when it warms up? So, I mean, the reason I'm distressed by these numbers is because flu season starts in 3 months or 2 months. Okay. So you will have a pandemic compounded by a epidemic, or something we would almost, it's not an epidemic. Let's call it just an endemic. We have an endemic disease very similar to in symptomatology to the initial symptoms of COVID. So you're going to have tens of thousands of people showing up with high fever and cough and all of the similar symptomatology to doctors' offices and to urgent clinics and to the ER. And now we don't have any control over what we're dealing with right now. How are we going to care for both floods of patients? Someone described the wave, the chart that you see here right now on my screen, as not a wave, but if you've ever seen the video of the earthquake that damaged Japan and caused the Fukushima reactor to be overwhelmed by the tsunami, et cetera. If you ever saw the tsunami, it's a wall of water. Okay, there's no nice dip behind it. It's just a wall of water that moves onto the shore, and it continues to move onto the shore at a elevated height of water. It's not a wave. It's just not. It doesn't. It just crushes everything in its path. And this is what happens when you don't contain it, which is your first opportunity, right? Containment. If you blow through containment, then you go into mitigation phase. If you fail at mitigation, then you get those massive rises in case counts, massive and rapid rises in case counts, which was our attempt to flatten that curve. Doesn't necessarily mean that we're not going to get the same number of cases, but you have an opportunity to spread them out until you get what we talked about just a few minutes ago, which is strategies on treatment. Okay, and then if you have enough pace behind the efforts on strategy on treatment and strategy on vaccination, then you're going to reduce the mortality overall because you have arrived at a way to treat these patients, keep them from dying, and then you have a way to prevent other people from getting it, by vaccination. So again, we talked about this last week. Karen remembers it well, that we are not going to see a vaccine this year. It is not likely that we see a vaccine that is highly effective in the fall of 2021. We will see one. We don't know if it's going to be highly effective. So, and I think Terry said he puts his bet on 3 years, which means, and so do I, on a highly effective vaccine that will be our first step in eradicating COVID as a disease. Okay, so, and the goal has to be eradication. One of the things that we saw with SARS-CoV-1 was 8,000 infections, 700 deaths, and it went away. There has been zero coverage of a comparison between SARS-CoV-1, which occurred in 2003, which was just known as SARS. It may have been called bird flu, I'm not sure, but it's SARS, Asian sudden acute respiratory syndrome, and also a coronavirus, genetically 99.97% similar. But where did it go? We don't have a vaccine for it, even though many medical centers worked on it and had it ready, and many vaccine developers are using that work to develop a vaccine for this one. But where did SARS-CoV-1 go? Well, one of the things that differentiates CoV-1 from CoV-2 is that people who became infected with CoV-1 were symptomatic within 2 to 3 days. Symptomatic. 97% of people were symptomatic within 2 to 3 days. Okay? So you got it, you got sick, and you got over it. And when you got sick, it was bad. So you didn't feel like going out and walking around or going to bars, or you just felt like you had a really, really bad flu. And for many of those who got sick, it was overwhelming pulmonary symptoms that caused them to stay the hell away from other people. Coughing, sputum production, acute respiratory distress, pneumonia. And so that caused them to find, seek medical care if they really needed it, or just isolate themselves. With this, 40% of the people are group. Please, I'll be right with you. 40% of the people who get infected walk around with no or very mild symptoms, and they continue to spread that for 9 to 14 days. This is what's causing SARS-CoV-2 to be a super spreader, and SARS-CoV-1 to basically create an evolutionary dead end for itself. It infected.
Andre,
go ahead.
Oh, I always thought it was a fascinating point that you made a couple calls ago about that, because people died from Ebola. Ebola was actually more contagious, but because it was people died from it faster, that it actually helped kind of control
Contain
it in
it.
a way.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, plus an Ebola patient is a devastating sight to behold. So when you come across a patient, you don't want to go anywhere near them. Okay. And those like you just mentioned, it kills so fast and it debilitates so quickly that there aren't happy Ebola patients walking around and going to bars, right? But there are happy COVID carriers going to bars and rallies and parties. And I mean, we saw it, right? We saw it. So, and we see it. And this is the cause of the spread. So now let's move on to testing. And then we'll do a little bit on herd immunity. But early on, like in early March, we didn't have any tests, right? The rest of the world had already started testing in January, at the end of January. We didn't do a damn thing in February. In early March, we started to see our first tests. And March 16th is the first time, I think, that we had a federal acknowledgement of an issue with infection in the United States. So the percentage of positive tests over the course of the last, 4 months, let's call it 4 months, we had so few tests and such high positivity rates that at the height of New York's being hit by COVID, 57% of all people tested were testing positive. That was a result of the fact that only symptomatic patients were being tested. And then also, as we became more proficient in testing and had the opportunity to test even asymptomatic patients, the number of positive tests has come down dramatically, right? So John Daw is one of them, right? Got tested recently, is negative. He's in that light orange bar of people who, I'm sorry.
Yay, I'm in an orange bar. Yay.
Yeah, you were among the daily total tests and the daily total positives. Now, the startling thing here, guys, to look at is not the blue curve, but the darker, I wish they used better colors here, but the darker orange on the very bottom there, okay? Look at the daily positives, okay? The daily positives are in the United States are hovering just below 5%. But again, this is an average. So we're including all those negative tests in Nebraska and Wyoming. Everywhere people thought, okay, I'm going to go get a test. Asymptomatic, symptomatic, this positivity rate should be falling. The WHO said that the goal is to keep a nation's positivity rate below 10%. That's an absurd goal because it's so high. The goal should be a positivity rate below 2%. But, when we're dealing with countries like Russia and Brazil, the WHO set the bar like this low. They're like, okay, just make sure that less than 10% of your tests are positive, and you're doing okay. All right, we're hovering at around 5%, and this is bad. This means that we've exerted no control over this disease, none, zero control. Does that make sense? Do we have questions on that?
Yeah, I got a question.
Yeah.
Some renowned famous political figure said that if you test more, you get more cases. So we should test less, so it would just go away.
Yeah, but did you see that graph now? So this is what the point this graph proves. If you invert this graph, okay, you'll see that even when you do very little testing, like in early March, okay, you get to a point where once you've tested at a certain level of the population, which you and I talked about week 3, okay, we need to get 10% of the population tested. That means 33 million people. We're at 23 million right now, okay? 23 million unique individuals need are currently testing, I believe, according to the Johns Hopkins reporting. That some of those people have been tested multiple times, like healthcare workers, so you can't include multiple tests. That doesn't make sense. Individual people need to be tested, okay? So once we hit 33 million individual people tested, then you got a 10% testing rate, and then you can make inferences, okay? But let me go back to the graph.
Hey, I made the honor roll when they stopped testing.
Honor roll?
Sorry, I'm available for parties. That was a joke.
So even look at Carrie, even when testing was low from March 29th to April 26th, that era where testing was still ramping up, right? Look at the positivity rate. So even when you test less, that doesn't make cases go away, for God's sake.
Well,
you know, and when you test more, it doesn't make more. Look at the other end of the graph.
I just know I live in a state with 29 million people. We're testing around 30,000 people a day.
Yes.
We are now up to 5,000 positive as of today from
yeah.
yesterday.
So how many are you doing a day, did you say? 30,000?
Yeah, I think that's what they're saying, 30,000.
Yeah, so 15% positivity rate about?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah. So, guys, wow. Okay. I mean, this should be etched on the wall in the White House or wherever. This is the infection cycle. Okay. And we've done none of it. None of it. Okay. We have not isolated and protected high-risk patients. Our nursing home deaths are climbing past 50,000, and we've lost 120,000, almost 120,000 Americans to this. Of those 120,000 people, we've lost 50,000 above the age of 65, the elderly. So we haven't done that. We have not appropriately nationally addressed how to on a state-by-state basis. Everybody's being allowed to do their own thing. That's evident. Okay, Arizona is not obeying the same rules that Pennsylvania is. I'm proud to say for the last 42 days here in Pennsylvania, our daily case count has been reducing. Daily positives.
And we're not even counting the people that are recovered but could be permanently disabled.
No, we're not. Okay. So not all the states are following a national guidance on treatment, decontamination, isolation, nothing. Even here in Pennsylvania, where we're doing well, nurses that I'm talking to are using one set of protocols in one health system, and then when they go do locum in another health system, it's different. Okay, so in the Geisinger health system, they have a very high level of availability of personal protective equipment. They use personal respirators in COVID. They have COVID wards. In other systems where they have, they're starving for nursing, they're paying them more to come in and outside the system, nurses to come in and work shifts that nobody else wants to work, like weekends and COVID shifts. And these nurses are telling me that when they go to those systems that are not as well managed, when it comes to quality and safety, they're given one N95 mask for the entire weekend, and there isn't a COVID ward, so COVID patients can be seen on the same floor, isolated behind like a plastic curtain or something. I mean, it's like, I can only imagine what it's like in South Carolina and the southern part of Georgia. I've seen these hospitals. Okay, they are 20 years behind the rest of the country. I'm not exaggerating. I was once called to give a lecture in a community hospital in southern Georgia on electronic health records. This was only 8 years ago. And I walked in there and I gave my presentation, and I was talking about the use of electronic health records to manage population health, chronic disease, and other things like that. And at the end of it, a bunch of people, a bunch of staff came up around the dais and said, wow, that's fascinating. And I was like, oh, I'm glad you liked it. Are there any parts of that that you're already doing, or, you know, would you like to get more information on implementation? They're like, we don't have electronic health records yet. So you just sat through my hour and a half lecture on the use of digital methodology. No one raised a hand and said, sorry, I don't understand what's going on here. We don't have electronic health records. So how the hell are we supposed to do this? No, this is the state of medicine in the United States. There isn't just racial and ethnic and economic disparity. There's scientific disparity. There's professional competence disparity. And how it's acceptable to us in 2020 in the United States with a $16 trillion GDP, supposedly the leader in the world in everything, to have not addressed any of these colorful little circles in the last 5 months, it's startling. It's startling. We continue to, so I covered susceptible hosts, I covered infectious agents. There's no national strategy on containment, on isolation, any of that. Because of those two things, we continue to see reservoirs. So from those reservoirs, COVID is comfortably migrating to different places, okay? So it's going from hotspots to now novel places. Let me just show you what I'm talking about here. Let's go to, so this is, the country is still largely hot. Can you guys see this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So the country is still largely hot, right? The West and the South especially are getting hit pretty hard. Arizona, South Carolina, Florida, Texas, Oklahoma, these are case totals. Let's adjust them for population. So per 100,000 residents, Arizona has 37 positives yesterday, 18 in South Carolina. So these states have millions of citizens in them. So these are the trend lines for the increases for last week. You see that the West and the South are getting hit. And now you'll see the trend line for the Northeast. Dear Pennsylvania, look at us. I wonder why that is. Keep making fun of our transgendered head of the public health here. Go ahead, keep making fun of her. Here's the 7-day average that I showed you on another graph, and look at this.
Oh boy.
We've got problems. And
That
we're not
almost has
addressing-
the chicken pox.
Yeah, right? Yeah, it does. That's the first quote that came into my mind. May there be a pox upon your home.
Oh, hey, our governor's going to see it through.
So this is awful. And let's go back to this, and we'll just keep going, then we'll open up for questions here. So, masks, the blue, portal and exit, right? Masks. If you're not wearing masks, which is like the simplest, basic, most inexpensive way to reduce transmission, then face-to-face conversations of 3 feet or less are going to be the primary mode of spread. We know that for sure. Large gatherings, an outstanding way for COVID to find new victims. So for this particular virus, it's not body fluids, it's not blood, it's not sweat. It is specifically mucous membrane of the oropharynx, nasopharynx, and the droplet-based through expectorant during conversation, during sneezing, during coughing, that aerosolizes and then goes and settles on another human being in their face, eyes, nose, and mouth area. And then within 2 to 3 hours, it takes a grip on those mucous membranes, and that's all it takes. That's all it takes. So, you know, last week I think we talked about gloves and why gloves are not necessary, and they cause a huge amount of waste, and people don't know how to use them well, and all that. That continues to remain even more true today. That glove usage is useless, and that mask usage is simple and effective, especially for when you are in a high human traffic area like a grocery store, a big box store, anywhere where a convenience store or gas station where people are in and out of a small enclosed space all day long. You can imagine how effective it is to reduce expectoration, reduce the spread of droplets when everyone that comes in and out of that space is wearing a mask. Okay, it's great for not allowing the expectorant to escape this area if you're asymptomatically carrying. It's great for preventing large if you're wearing a cloth mask, droplets from dropping on your face, nose, and mouth area, right? Great for that. So I can't see why anyone would or should object to wearing a mask in those circumstances. We, as scientists in the biomedical community, as epidemiologists, virologists, general medicine, whoever, people with a biomedical background, it doesn't take more than 3 brain cells for us to explain that this is all you need to do. You don't need to wear it all day long. If you are working in a work environment, yes, you do. But for the general public, it's only when you are going to be within 6 feet of another human being that you don't know.
Can I go over some of the stories I see online
please.
about, especially mask wearing?
Yes.
It's my choice, my freedom to not wear a mask. It's liberty. I get headaches, and I have asthma, probably not diagnosed. It's a barrage of excuse making by spoiled little kids.
Yeah.
It's the one thing that's going to help us get the numbers down. And it's, you know, because of that flip flop of no, don't wear a mask in the beginning. Well, now that we're blasting off across the country with the numbers, it is the single most important thing people can be doing is putting on a fucking mask.
Absolutely correct. It is the single most important thing that people can be doing. Last week we covered how Austria saw a 90% reduction in transmission when they saw a ubiquitous mask usage in their country. 70 to 80% reduction in Asian countries that recommended ubiquitous mask usage in public settings. So clearly, the states that are seeing increased transmission and increased daily cases clearly are not insisting on mask usage, and that is reflecting in the numbers.
Our governor strongly urges it. He just won't put in place anything to mandate it because that would go against liberty.
Right. Yes. So, you know, those excuses that you just read off, to those people, all I could say is stay home. Send someone else in to do those chores. Don't go to Costco and stand outside and complain that you're not being allowed to. Okay? Just send someone else for now. Yeah. Okay? That would be great. Thank you. So transmission, obviously we talked about transmission is aerosol based. Dr. Kim Prather, the internationally renowned, and she's the the queen of aerosolized infectious disease, a very ignominious title, but she has figured this out. This is now the cause of the spread. Asymptomatic carriers and face-to-face or close contact droplet-based infection. All right, any questions on this? And then we're doing herd immunity.
Before you go to herd immunity, everyone has to tell me in chat which animal they think of when we talk about herd immunity. I want to know what comes into your head. Mine is gazelle.
Okay.
I think of gazelles.
Cow.
Oh,
I'm going to go with the angry rats from New York.
Yes.
I should have said cow. I'm from Wisconsin.
Okay. All right. You're monitoring chat and Q&A?
Indeed, I am, and I have a question for you about COVID and kidney disease when
Sure.
we get to. Do you want to do it now or?
No, we'll do herd immunity now.
Okay.
Yeah. So I got this question. It's an excellent question, and it's multi-part. So I want to cover each one. It's from Gerda in Arizona. And so the first question was, have we as a species ever achieved herd immunity for any virus, and I assume any infectious agent, and in the complete absence of a vaccine? The answer is most probably yes. And then the next question that would come up in my mind is, well, which one? Which ones did we develop a herd immunity to? Well, the interesting answer to that is that we will never know. The intricacies of our immune response and what keeps us safe on a daily basis while allowing us to have a symbiotic relationship with beneficial viruses and bacteria is a kind of acquired through heredity, natural immunity to the deleterious effects of certain viruses and bacteria, which also allows us to host them. So in our gut flora, we have various bacteria. We even have E. coli in our systems that help us produce vitamin K. That provides vitamin K in adequate amounts, which is essential for our clotting and the viscosity of our blood. So yes, evolutionarily, we have developed immunity as a species to many, many viruses and bacteria. We have a sort of tolerant immunity, which allows us to recognize viruses and bacteria as non-harmful and just allow them to live either on our skin or within our gut flora. And they perform various processes and chemical conversions and biochemical symbiosis with us. So yes, that's the simple answer to that. Which ones? Imagine though that 100,000 or 150,000 years ago, early humans were developing herd immunity against a novel virus or a novel bacteria, which was infectious. But we did it successfully. Let's say a clade of human beings in Southern Europe or Northern Africa or wherever had an infectious agent. It killed a bunch of us, but a bunch of us survived. And the survivors then developed an immunity that prevented that infectious agent from pursuing its evolution. And so at that stage of when we developed a herd immunity, we probably never saw that virus or bacteria infect human beings again. It may have led to the extinction of that bacteria or virus, so we would never know its character, its name, or anything like that. And therefore, it hit an evolutionary dead end as a result of us developing herd immunity for it. So that's the answer to that. Do we have any that currently that we can say we're immune to? Let's ask a virologist, but my guess as a physician is that many of the viruses that infect other species are things that we are immune to. Okay, and there are many reasons for that. They just don't find the grip via a molecular mechanism of infection on us that they would find in a dog, like parvovirus, or in a horse, or any other species. So we could come across it, we could even ingest it. It does us no harm because it can't actually infect us, and we actually may have developed that immunity as a species. So not clear on that, but that's my explanation. Is it even meaningful to talk about achieving herd immunity for COVID by letting the whole population get it? And then obviously she qualified that question with people argue against the notion for herd immunity because in order to achieve it, a large percentage of the population will need to be infected. That results in a large percentage of the population dying. The estimate is almost around 3 million people would die just for the United States to achieve 80% infectivity. And, all right, let's not get into those numbers, but mortality would be extremely high. So, but for those who accept mortality in order to get herd immunity, is it even an actionable suggestion? Let's address that one question. The short answer is no. We saw Sweden experimenting with what would happen if a society said, let's just proceed. And we will isolate those who are most susceptible and let everyone else just deal with it as they would any other infectious agent, such as influenza, or even more dangerous ones like MRSA or whatever. We don't shut down the economy for methicillin-resistant Staph aureus. We don't shut down the economy for influenza, but they kill. Why should we shut down the economy for COVID? Because we can treat the flu, we can treat MRSA not effectively. We can contain those. We can contain their spread somewhat. And we have a vaccine, especially for flu, we have a vaccine that is largely effective in preventing morbidity and mortality of the flu. We don't understand enough about COVID, and it is enough evidence that in some societies it can kill, have a case fatality rate of 14 or 15%, and then in some societies it can have one of less than 1%. We still haven't figured out why, and we need that. We need to know that. Is a human life valuable to a government, a corporation, a entity? Well, maybe that's just a gauge of what we value as a society. Maybe Russia looks at a Russian life differently than than America looks at an American life, or India looks at an Indian life, or New Zealand as a government, as a society looks at a New Zealander's life. Maybe it comes down to that when we define whether or not herd immunity is worth experimenting on. But here's a little bit of a visual. So 80% of the population, in an R naught of 2 to 3, 80% of the population would need to be vaccinated or have effective antibodies, neutralizing antibodies, for herd immunity to exist, sufficient to prevent the spread of the pandemic. All right. In New York City, the current estimate is about 11.5 to 14% have effective or neutralizing antibodies. In London, similar. Madrid, Boston, much less. Maybe 5% have neutralizing antibodies. And Stockholm, with its grand experiment in Sweden, again, there are so many factors that go into whether that, whether a society will effectively get herd immunity in absence of a vaccine. But we're seeing, and part of it is how close are these people to each other, okay? So Tokyo, Japan would have a much different model than Stockholm, Sweden, just because of the distance between people living in the same environment, right? Tokyo, people are stacked one on top of each other. Stockholm largely is quite the opposite. Next question. We don't, as far as I know, we don't know what percentage of population. Actually, we do. So with an R naught of 2 to 3%, 2 to 3, the percentage is 60 to 80%, 80% providing herd immunity. Do we know what proportion? Okay, sorry. Go through the disease being symptomatic. So do we know what that proportion that will be? Also, as far as I know, do we know for how long people have immunity after COVID-19 in the absence of a vaccine? Is it possible to have herd immunity when individuals may not have immunity for more than a few months or years post-disease? See, outstanding question. So the answer again is that we don't know if for coronavirus as a general infectious agent, we believe that the effective neutralizing antibodies will last for about 3 years. It may be that it's as short a period as 10 to 18 months that your body will maintain those antibodies. Again, the reasons immunologically we'd have to, it's a molecular mechanism, but it's much more detailed than that. And again, we're dealing with a virus that mutates rapidly. So it's not measles, mumps, rubella, chickenpox, where the mutation is slow. It's much more akin to, but not as fast as flu. Flu mutates quickly. SARS-CoV-2 probably mutates equivalently fast. So this year's COVID, the effective strains of COVID in this season or this first wave are most likely going to be very different in the future. So they're going to mutate and be different in the future. And we're going to have to do what we do with flu, is update a library of mutations and update the vaccine that we give on a yearly basis to reflect those mutations and those prevalent strains.
Sanjay, didn't the UK start to kind of go down the herd immunity road? But
yeah, and then Boris got sick and they said, no, let's not do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, once Boris felt what it's like to get sick, I think he turned about face. Okay. Do I have more on here? Okay.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, there's a question from Benjamin Nix, but real quick on what you were saying about morbidity in the 330 million people who live in this country. Herd immunity, the morbidity is what percentage? 10%?
Yeah, 10 to 12%.
Okay, so you're talking about if all 330 million people got it, or 80% of it, then 10% of that would have either years or a lifetime illness to deal with as an added benefit of having gotten this disease, which is, wear a mask.
Yeah, exactly. No, that is absolutely that's probably, oh God, I hate to have to devolve into a discussion of financial cost and impact. Dead people don't cost anything other than loss of productivity. But people who live with morbidity cost the healthcare system a lot. So if your reasoning is based on a spreadsheet that an economist would use to determine whether it's a good idea to not wear a mask, then let's make sure the economist puts into his or her equations, the fact that, as Terry just mentioned, nearly 28 to 30 million people will require an elevated utilization of our healthcare system if we just let this go and said, okay, let's just go the herd immunity route. And then the rest of us are going to end up paying higher premiums to take care of those 28 to 30 million people for the rest of their lives. So it looks like COVID is a socialist. It looks like the virus is strongly advocating for socialized medicine in this country, because it would love to infect 330 million people and cause the rest of us to pay for 30 million people, their health care. So that's for all the economists out there. All right, let me just see. Let's go get rid of this thing. And
there is another question in the
yeah.
I guess there's a couple.
It's Benjamin's question about the kidney disease. Yeah. So Benjamin wanted to know if there has been any studies of the effect of COVID on individuals with kidney disease, and have those studies returned any information on pediatric patients with kidney disease?
Okay, so kidney injury comes in many different types. The nephron is the ultimate single unit of the kidney. We have millions of nephrons, and our blood flows through these. They're a filtration unit. It takes out all of the bad stuff and waste, concentrates it along with other water soluble elements of waste, and it gets rid of it. And so one of the things that we should understand about the nephron is it's very delicate, and it can be injured by things like drugs. It could be injured by infection. And COVID itself is a virus that attacks the epithelium and endothelium. So there is not a direct infection or damage to the kidney caused by the virus itself. It is what happens to the kidney is an injury caused by either the immune system recognizing there's a viral infection and then going into overdrive and releasing a bunch of highly damaging immune responses that go into the bloodstream and that trigger a cascade. So the cascade could be part of your immune system. So it could be T cells being activated. It could be natural killer cells, cytokines, and other things that regulate your local, fever response and other things. So, we know that the extremely high fever can damage delicate things in the body. Like a high fever can damage the brain, it can damage kidneys, it can damage the liver. Anytime that you've got sustained 104 fever for hours or days, nephrons get damaged. So that's one aspect of the disease that has a downstream effect on kidneys. So also you have in children this multi-systemic immune mechanism that is again not caused by the virus itself. The virus isn't going into the kidney, trying to replicate inside the kidney, doing damage to the kidney and its cells, like it does in the lung tissue. Okay, so it enters the lungs, creates a lower respiratory tract infection by attaching itself to the mucosal membranes and inside of the lungs, replicates, does damage. That's what causes fibrosis. That's what causes the breathing difficulty and pneumonia. It doesn't do that with the kidney. One of the things that we're seeing in pediatrics and children is that, again, it's the immune response to that infection that is causing Kawasaki-like syndrome, okay? So that we're seeing in the form of rashes and flushing and just this general irritation or inflammation, okay? So the inflammation and all of the chemicals that go with inflammatory response are what are really going to do the damage to the kidneys. That's mechanism number one. Mechanism number two is what we call microcoagulopathy. So a trigger in the cascade that leads to clotting in the bloodstream will cause not the kind of clotting and that you see in your skin when you get a little cut, you know, and then you get the scab and all that. Imagine that happening on a microscopic scale. Imagine tiny little clots going and getting stuck inside of the capillaries that feed or surround the nephron, okay? What that does is it stops blood flow, it stops oxygenation, it stops the exit of waste material, and then your kidney kind of dies this hypoxic death, okay? All these tiny little clots are getting caught in the vascular bed of the tissue itself, of the organ itself. That's the second mechanism of injury. So we call this acute AKI, acute kidney injury. Now, if you collectively, you're sick for 10, 12 days, you're hospitalized, or even for those adults that stay in the hospital 30 days or longer, which we're seeing is, you know, common with COVID infection, with cyclical high fever for many weeks, you can imagine what that is doing to the kidney tissue, to the heart tissue, to the lung, liver, and other organs. And that that attack of your immune system on your own organs, and then also subsequently the clotting, the microclotting that's occurring throughout the body, is also leading to the morbidity that Terry just talked about, okay? The morbidity is, I feel better, I can't leave the hospital without a wheelchair because I've got clots in my joints, I've got clots in my heart tissue, I've got clots in my muscle, and it's going to take me weeks or months to feel any better until all these clots are melted, you know, by the normal mechanism of getting rid of clots. Imagine your whole body having a scab from the inside out and how long that would take to repair itself. That's what's happening. And that's specifically what's happening to the kidneys and kidney injuries. Bad news is, of those 10 to 12% with morbidity, some of them will never get better. Some of them will proceed down the pathway towards chronic kidney disease, okay? And chronic kidney disease is of 4 stages, where your glomerular filtration rate, that nephron, has a certain rate that it can filter the blood. When it drops, okay? Gets worse and worse and worse at filtering your blood. You then get to a state where your kidney is no longer effective, right? That's end stage renal disease, right? That's when you need dialysis. You need a machine to clean your blood because your kidneys no longer work. And I think we covered last week how this goes back to the finances of it. You could take care of 5,000 chronic kidney disease patients for $150,000 a year. Just make sure they get their tests and they're on their right blood pressure meds and other meds to take care of. Make sure that their kidneys don't deteriorate, all right? Of those 5,000, if 300 drop into end-stage renal disease, it's going to cost you $9 million to do dialysis for them per year. Okay, so, and now that goes back to our chart from an hour ago, which is with 30,000 new cases a day, we're going to lose 450 of them to death, and we're going to have 3,000 of them with morbidity. So get ready to pay higher premiums, all you economists out there.
Sanjay,
Okay.
there's a really good question about antibiotics.
Sure.
And I'm just going, before I ask it, I'm going to subject everyone to my social commentary on the overuse of antibiotics in America. It's my personal opinion that Americans don't particularly crave antibiotics, but a lot of them don't have paid sick leave at their job. So they want whatever they can do to get better faster. So they pressure their physicians. That's That's my social commentary on America's
Okay.
use of over antibiotics. So Gregory is asking thoughts on the abuse of antibiotics in our culture.
Mhm.
And is it causing higher rates of mortality or impacting recovery?
Okay.
Have
I'm
you
going to
heard
take
any
the
talk
first.
of that?
So I'll take the first part of that question. Are antibiotics overused in our society? Yes, 100%. Yes, we are. We overuse antibiotics. So typically, typically when people get sick with a sore throat, they will call their physician, and the correct antibiotic, we call it antibiotic stewardship. The correct antibiotic stewardship is to actually test in advance for the infectious agent and then prescribe the antibiotic based on the class of the infectious agent. So we have macrolides, and we have all of these different classes of antibiotics. They work either they're narrow spectrum and they work on only a specific type of bacteria. They're broad spectrum. They work on a number of different types of bacteria. And when we use the term antibiotic, remember that that is specifically for a bacterial infection, okay? Antivirals are for viral infections. And we have been largely unsuccessful in creating highly effective antivirals. We have been very successful in creating highly successful antibiotics. Now, antibiotics started in medical practice with penicillin. They evolved into penicillin analogs that were more stable or more effective or more, they were able to cross certain barriers within the body more easily. And then we moved on to more sophisticated antibiotics. And eventually we were able to synthesize our own, not just derive them from natural places as penicillin was, but also kind of synthesize our own based on what we learned from natural antibiotics. That's great. Unfortunately, when we also realized a few decades later that these bacteria, when they come in contact with a chemical agent that results in there are two types of antibiotics, cidal and static. Okay, bactericidal means you give it and it kills the bacteria. Static means you give it and the bacteria can't replicate. It can't reproduce anymore. Okay, so the colonies of bacteria that were able to escape death had some enzyme or some protective mechanism that allowed them to continue to replicate. They left their weaker cousins behind and they moved on evolutionarily. All right. So they jump from Terry to Sanjay. Sanjay takes the antibiotic that Terry took, but it doesn't work as well on him. They jump from Sanjay to Karen. Karen takes the same antibiotic as Terry did, and it doesn't work at all. Okay, that's just the microcosm. This is supposed to happen on the thousands upon thousands of patient level, but I'm giving you what might be, help you understand it on what's going on your screen right now. Okay, so if you give an antibiotic indiscriminately without knowing what is actually infecting Terry, then what you will do is you will stimulate some of the bacteria that he is getting sick from to protect themselves and move on evolutionarily. This is the development of antibiotic resistance. This is what was infuriating is 4 months ago when we heard from France that some doctor gave the H word plus ceftriaxone IV plus azithromycin and then said, oh, you know what? That H stuff, it really works. How do you know? When you have so many confounding factors, including the confounding of mechanisms of action with IV ceftriaxone and azithromycin, oral azithromycin. How do you know that? Okay, and also azithromycin is one of those awesome miracle drugs that we came up with. Okay, that is a macrolide and that is fast going to be rendered obsolete if you give it indiscriminately. Okay, so every time there's a sore throat about 10 years, every time there was a sore throat about 10 years ago, doctors were like, here, Z-Pak. Okay, horrible. Okay, first do the throat swab, then figure it out. Figure out if it's strep, figure out if it's staph, figure out if it's whatever. Okay, then pick from your catalog of 17 different antibiotics which one is going to be the most effective, and then perform the stewardship. What's going on? John's trying to signal me.
I think he's.
Oh, the H word.
Yeah, the H word. We're not supposed to mention the H word.
Yeah. So I hope I'm starting to make it clear. We're horrible at this, and the more we do, we continue this pattern of prescribing from the medical community, indiscriminate prescribing from us, and indiscriminate taking it from you guys in the general public. We're going to render obsolete certain drugs that are extremely useful right now. And then, it is a molecular arms race with the bacteria and virus. Every time we come up with a new weapon, they come up with a new defense. So, the other thing is, it's a 7-day course of something. All right. Doc, I feel better now. 3rd day, I feel better. Doesn't finish the course. Okay. How many times does this happen? Okay. I feel better. Didn't finish the course, but I'm not going to, I don't need it. It gives me a metallic taste in my mouth. My stomach's upset, but I feel great. So I'm not going to finish the course. What you're doing is allowing whatever bacteria or that you didn't kill with the initial course to escape an evolutionary trajectory and become resistant. Okay, now do this on the scale of hundreds of thousands of people or millions globally, and you'll see how fast we make obsolete. Erythromycin's obsolete.
So you're saying that taking your full antibiotic prescription is good for your community?
It is. It's absolutely. And it not just taking the full course, but also asking and being a knowledgeable consumer of medical information and medicine itself. Doc, what do I have? How do you know that this is the right medicine? Okay. All of that. Okay. Don't be afraid to ask. In fact, the doctors that field those questions and educate you are the best ones. They're the ones that you want to keep as your doc. The ones that say, you don't need to know, don't worry about it, just take it. No, sorry. That's not medicine anymore. It shouldn't be. Sandra said I promised what? What was I supposed to do?
The H word.
Oh yeah, no, I left it alone. I left it alone. See, I went after azithromycin this time.
See, but we're calling it the H word. We might as well call it that.
Yes, no, I left it totally alone. But no, it makes, in context of what we're talking about with antibiotic, antiviral, and resistance and effectiveness. Yeah. There's been a fear for the last 10 years in the HIV community that AZT and the agents that were started, Zika, that HIV could mutate past those, and that we would start to see a strain of HIV that was triple cocktail resistant. And actually, we have. Okay, so this is the kind of stewardship and vigilance that all of us have to be aware of. My dad was my greatest teacher, but I used to see him bring these patients in that were referred to him. They'd have 11 drugs on their medical complexity. Their medication complexity was unbelievable. it's because they had a nephrologist, they had a primary care doc, they had a allergist or a pulmonologist, and there's no one coordinating, right? No one saying, well, and all of the doctors afraid to say, well, I don't think you should be taking this. They're afraid to step on each other's toes. All right. So my dad would feel most satisfied when he was able to take a medication list and cut it in half and say, you don't need this, you don't need this, this is more effective, take this, and then take that 11 drugs down to 5 or 6, right? Pill popping in this country is out of control, out of control. And it's no one's fault and it's everyone's fault. So you got to be educated about what you're putting in your mouth, all the time.
Madeline had a question about food antibiotics in our food chain. Does that also contribute to resistance?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if we keep pumping our cows and chickens and whatever with antibiotics, you're developing super strains of superbugs. Many of the killer E. coli come from excessive use of antibiotics on beef stocks. Absolutely. Yeah, we could trace, 126 is the strain number, 0126 E. coli, comes directly from California. Yeah, it's a resistant strain. So that. Madeline also asked about statins last week. So I read up, and indications are that statin is, it has a tertiary anti-inflammatory effect. So if you're on a statin right now, don't stop, obviously. But also, they're investigating whether it could actually be slightly protective. But it would be in the same category of protection as Pepsid, as famotidine. So there's some molecular mechanism of protection, but it's tertiary. It's not tip of the spear against the virus.
Hey, real quick, I had a question on
Yes.
Facebook. Actually, it's several questions, but
Okay,
I'll go over. Should we be worrying about opening up schools in the fall?
Great question. Really
Sorry, I don't have any information about that.
That was my Google. That's hilarious.
Well, he told you. So.
That's Dr. Google.
Have you been cheating on us? Do you have
No.
like a little earpiece?
I've been experimenting with home automation. This is able to for me to turn my thermostat on, off, air conditioning, and the lights in my boys' rooms. So that's pretty. But Dr. Google is definitely not reliable when it comes to COVID. I lost my train of thought. But
Schools.
yeah. So the thing is that these we can't do what they're asking us to do. Whoever is writing these recommendations from the CDC has actually probably never stepped inside of recently inside of a school environment. That you can't ask third graders to wear a mask all day. Okay, so nor can you expect children to physically distance for a long time every day for months that is not how we're going to effectively and safely open the schools. So effectively and safely protect our communities, masking in large high human traffic areas, yes, because we're going to have to share spaces with people we don't know, okay, that don't have the same level of vigilance as we do with all these other things that we're doing, right? Hand washing, personal hygiene, all that. We don't know. But when you're all together, when we have to share a grocery store, we all have to go in there with a mask, do our thing, and leave. When we're going into a gas station, a small enclosed space where hundreds of people are in and out, convenience store, you're gonna have to use a mask. Okay. Asking kids to do that is probably impossible. Okay. It's also it's just not long-term feasible. So what are you going to do? Ask them to do that in September and October, and then by November, just say, it's okay. No, you need to have a strategy. You need to start as you wish to finish, right? How are kids going to be asked to act on the day one of school so that they can do that comfortably until the day that school ends in 2021, in spring 2021? Okay, because making these little micro adjustments throughout the school year, oh, you don't have to do this now, oh, you have to do this now, is just going to confuse kids and teachers. So you need to have a strategy that works day one, that everybody can get used to and follow till the end of school. Okay, so I've been asked to work on this strategy in the school where I send my boys. We have 5 other docs that send their kids there. We're collaborating on what's going to work, and we have small class sizes, so we're super lucky, right? The largest class size is like 14 maybe, and it's going to be easy, and there's plenty of space and all this other stuff, but we're going to rely on testing. Okay, we're going to ask the parents to get tested. We're going to ask them to make sure their contact circle is well monitored. We're going to make sure the kids all get tested, that there's random testing for the teachers. It's going to come down to keeping the freaking virus out of the environment where those kids are going to spend 6 to 7 hours a day. Okay, that's what's going to work, not masks and distancing.
Question.
Right? Yeah.
Okay, so what starts at the same time as school?
Work.
The flu season.
Oh, flu season. Yeah.
Okay, so and a follow-up question, a school, say they start with temperature taking, even, the teacher comes up with a fever. You don't know if it's flu, you don't know if it's COVID. They have to go out for X amount of days. Same with any kid testing positive, not testing positive, but coming in with a temperature. Normally you would send them and it's got to be a full day without a fever before they can return to school.
Yeah, no, you're going to have to say that, if you come down with a fever, the first thing you do is get tested. Okay, so the random screening of people that are in and out of that environment, adults, is so that there's no we reduce the amount of asymptomatic spread. Okay, so the teachers they all get tested 14 days before school. They get tested the week after school starts. All right, and they get tested randomly every 3 weeks. All right, so that we will catch any kind of asymptomatic carrier in the adult population that's interacting with the kids in the school environment. That's one. Again, we're coming up with it on our own because there's no one telling us how to do this properly from either the state or federal level. Okay, so we're using our best, science training and biomedical training to implement that in our school. How every other school is going to do it, I don't know, but we have to look for the schools that come up with a successful plan and then use positive deviance to spread that as a model. Okay, it is literally Mad Max beyond Thunderdome at this point. How you keep that engine running, it's up to you.
If I were to look into my crystal ball, I see computer learning in the future of the United States for the next 2 years.
And Terry, I have to push back because I don't think that's effective. And I have friends that are telling me that their kids with special needs they can't thrive like that. They can't do it. And there's plenty of those kids. And there are kids that have learning disabilities that need the physical environment. They need the physical interaction with their teachers. There are kids with those are the kids that are among the general population of other students, but they just need an extra assistance. But then there's a whole population of learning disabled, okay, and learning challenged or whatever, autistic, Asperger, other kids that have more specific specialized requirements. Putting them in front of a screen is is going to defeat their entire progress.
Okay. But
So-
I understand that, and I'm only coming back with, you see, 16 people go to a restaurant together.
Yeah.
12 of them come out positive.
Yep, I saw that too.
Okay, and then in Dallas, in the restaurant district, 19 employees came down positive in a week.
Yep.
So you're going to have a group of children who will be fidgeting and playing with their masks,
Yep.
and with flu and COVID to play around with this fall. It's not ideal, but I think we'll actually see schools closing down again. And I understand completely what you said about special needs and what their need is specifically for the human interaction.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's going to be possible.
Hey,
Yeah.
I can settle this debate. Leslie brought up the breathalyzer tester from last week. We have viewers that pay attention. We'll have the breathalyzer.
We need extremely rapid testing. When you said you got your test result in 2 hours, I was like, wow. Okay. We have my nursing friend has a lab associated with her unit, and they are turning it around in 6 hours because they're doing on site, right? 6 hours is remarkable. 2 hours is outstanding, but 20 minutes. Let's work on 20 minutes, and let's because if a kid comes in and is running a fever, we can't even let them inside the environment. Okay, that's one thing. And then I don't want to send them home without them knowing what's going on, because you send them home back, you're sending the kid back into an environment where they can infect others. So we need a rapid testing strategy. We need rapid testing capabilities. For now, we can do with 1 or 2 days, okay? But as we try to really reopen our society, our economy, our schools, our leisure environments and things like that, testing is critical. You can't stop something that you can't see. You've got to be able to shed light on it.
And Sanjay, that's UCLA that's working on the breathalyzer?
No, Ben Gurion University in Israel. 1 second, I got to deal with the pack here. Hold on, bear. What do you guys want?
And this is where John is supposed to come in and dance and sing for us.
Oh, hello. While we're waiting, we just want to thank everybody for using the questions and answers panel tonight. It's so much easier than the chat message. I'm sure my moderators will agree. And thank you to everyone watching on Facebook. Andre's supposed to come back by now, but I'll keep talking about.
I can give people an update on last week. Charlie living in the garage.
Yes, let's do that.
Oh yeah, Charlie's living in the garage.
So if everyone remembers, Charlie, the cable guy, went into a house, and he was informed as he was leaving that someone in the house had COVID. So he quarantined himself in his garage, but it was a nice man garage. We saw pictures from Heather, and he did test negative, and Charlie is out of the garage.
Outstanding. Good. Yeah.
Oh, and we have Heather. Heather, you've joined us.
Can we let her in?
But we can't see her. She doesn't have her picture, but she's
Audio?
Yes.
Okay.
Heather, did you want to add anything to Charlie's story? Oh,
Oh,
that's Charlie, everyone.
oh, Charlie.
Charlie and Heather belong in a shampoo commercial. They have great.
Yes.
They have great hair.
I'm so glad he's happy, he's healthy and back in the house. That's great news. That's a terrible scare,
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm really happy for him. All right, let me see if there's anything else on the. Does anyone have any specific questions, drugs, therapies, or anything like that? I mean, we cover this every week, obviously. people, I think, hopefully understand that social distancing is probably over. Physical distance will need to continue, right? Physical distancing is just staying 6 feet away from people you don't know in public environments and making sure you have a mask on. That's going to reduce the spread of transmission. I mean, the rate of transmission. Washing your hands after you've come in contact with other environments where there are other people shopping or doing those things. Washing your hands often after you've come back into your home, so that it doesn't potentially fall, touching your face after you do that kind of activity, and generally being cautious about expanding your circle of contacts. So going to concerts or a rally or a bar, or these are all extremely high risk, extremely dangerous things to do. And by dangerous, I mean, you're just putting yourself in a position where transmission is much more likely than if you don't, do those things. All right. By dangerous, I don't mean that you're definitely going to get sick. I don't mean that this thing, if you get it, is definitely going to be of major detriment, may kill you, or may maim you, or your kidneys, your liver, your heart. All of those things are possibilities, and you increase the risk of that being the case if you engage in these activities too soon and without thinking. So until we see less than 1,000, less than 500, less than 300, less than 100 cases a day in this country, like they are seeing in Europe and in other countries where they've exerted control, we're not safe. Our kids are not safe. Our hospitals are not safe. Can we achieve those things? Yeah. Yeah, we can. Don't let anyone convince you that we can't. If they can do it, we can do it. If Pennsylvania can do it, Arizona can do it. Okay? But we've all got to act in a cogent and cohesive manner that is evidence-based and that is sensible. There's no other argument. There is no other valid argument unless somebody wants to argue with me. I'm up for it. Because no, I think I'm just saying, because Gerda sent me the email, and it was a genuine question about what would happen if we just let this thing go without control measures, without attempting further containment. Could we achieve herd immunity? And the answer is yes and no. So it's not very clear. And if we tried it, the cost is going to be enormous.
Hey, Sanjay?
So, yeah.
Just real quick, a reminder, you told us how long it took Europe to develop a herd immunity for the Black Plague?
Yeah, 400 years.
Okay. Just something to keep in mind, that this is going to be, when it comes around, a seasonal thing. So that herd immunity isn't going to be the optimum.
No. It's impossible with a virus too. I mean, with a fast mutating virus, it's impossible. We achieved it with smallpox, with mumps, with measles. Obviously, we did that through vaccination, not through, and polio, eradication, through vaccination. We didn't just, allow these infections to proceed. There was even a question about 30, 40 years ago, when kids got infected, to rapidly control, instead of spread out like this chickenpox season. There are stories that I've heard of families just getting the kids together and letting them all have chickenpox and get it over with in a week or two. And that's not, it's just not ideal. Even back then, that's just not a great idea. But it's not the kind of disease that you could just allow that to happen. Do you understand what I'm extrapolating here? We can't, even though 80% of people will get over this pretty easily, you can't use that as a metric to say, well, it is what it is, and we have to go on with life. We just as we go on with life with influenza, and just when we go on with life with other diseases. This is very different. And the other contrast is to even SARS-CoV-1. The infection of SARS-CoV-1 effect, again, as I said in the beginning of this town hall today, it occurred from the point of infection to feeling sick was 2 to 3 days. You were over it in 6 days of illness. And the illness was either mild, moderate, or very severe acute respiratory distress requiring ventilation. SARS-CoV-1 did not cause microcoagulopathy. It didn't cause acute kidney injury, acute heart injury, acute pulmonary fibrosis, and all those other things. It didn't cause a cytokine storm. Okay, so this is different than its cousin, and it can spread differently and more broadly than its cousin did. And can we expect a SARS-CoV-3? Yes, we can. And unless we continue to be vigilant and put pressure on countries that in Africa and Asia and Latin America that are encroaching on the Amazon, the Congo, forests in Asia, and taking bushmeat or wild game and mixing it with livestock like chicken, cattle, pigs, etc. We're giving them the opportunity for these variants to go from one species to another and ultimately to us. So it all comes down to what we're doing to the planet, how we are affecting it. We are asking for it. We're asking to be punched in the face by a SARS-CoV-3. And we can't just say, oh, we're American, it's not our fault. We're all human on this planet. So we need to be talking to the other humans that are doing it and saying, stop, please.
Excuse me, where have several of these come from in the last 20 years? I don't want to point a finger.
All Asia. These are all Asian viruses, other than,
If I were to pick a specific country, though,
yeah,
who would I pick?
You would pick China. Yes.
Okay, just
yes.
Right.
To be clear, yes. They need to stop putting what is it called? A Himalayan all of these jungle animals, they have to stop trapping them, killing them, putting them next to pig meat, chicken meat, beef in the same wet market, and expecting nothing bad to go wrong.
I heard that the bat fruit smoothie is pretty good.
Oh my God, they have got to stop. Just like you see in Democratic Republic of Congo, Uganda, Cameroon, they have bushmeat markets, and you can trace like when they're trapping them, the animal bites and weird animal zoonotic infections when they're out there trapping them and getting scratched and bitten. They're all opportunities for infection, Marburg, Ebola, just these weird, horrible viruses. So stop. Anyway, any other, there's one in the Q&A I see. Carol.
Oh yeah, she's taking the Amtrak instead of the train. I think you scared her last week.
Okay, Amtrak's not bad.
She's saying the dining car is closed and it's takeout only. Mm-hmm. So eating in their cabin, and she's more comfortable.
More comfortable than flying 6 hours in a silver COVID tube.
Your air turn. I was a frequent train rider, and your air turnover is much better in a train, I think, than in an airplane.
Yeah, and also absolutely. And God, I love trains. They're very comfortable. In
Yeah.
India, it is the preferred mode of travel. It used to be, but yeah, I wish we had high-speed rail here in the U.S. like they have in Europe. It would be a lot safer than flying right now. So good job, Carol. Good choice. Yes. Okay, we're approaching our 9:30. Is John around to help us close out the show, or any other questions, or can I open it up? Otherwise, to any questions on Facebook or anything else? What was that?
Dr. Google, he's not ready to sign off.
Oh, National Weather Service alert. There's a thunderstorm in our area. Okay.
Thunderstorms.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry for all the interruptions this week.
Yay. Okay. Well, this is where I play the music, right? Here
Yes,
we go.
John. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, John, for continuing to produce, working 2 or 3 jobs at a time. And we hope to see you all next week. Go to our group page as well as our resource page. Submit questions. I will be out of Facebook jail next week.
Supposedly. All right, everyone. Have a great night. We'll open it up for group conversation in just a minute, so stick around if you like.